Chapter 62, Part 1 of The Golden Bough. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer, Chapter 62, Part 1. The Fire Festivals of Europe. Section 1. The Fire Festivals in General. All over Europe, the peasants have been accustomed from time immemorial to kindle bonfires on certain days of the year, and to dance round or leap over them. Customs of this kind can be traced back on historical evidence to the Middle Ages, and their analogy to similar customs observed in antiquity goes with strong internal evidence to prove that their origin must be sought in a period long prior to the spread of Christianity. Indeed, the earliest proof of their observance in northern Europe is furnished by the attempts made by Christian synods in the 8th century to put them down as heathenish rites. Not uncommonly, effigies are burned in these fires, or a pretense is made of burning a living person in them, and there are grounds for believing that anciently human beings were actually burned on these occasions. A brief view of the customs in question will bring out the traces of human sacrifice and will serve at the same time to throw light on their meaning. The seasons of the year when the bonfires are most commonly lit are spring and midsummer, but in some places they are kindled also at the end of autumn or during the course of the winter, particularly on Halloween or the 31st of October, Christmas Day, and the eve of Twelfth Day. Space forbids me to describe all these festivals at length. A few specimens must serve to illustrate their general character. We shall begin with the fire festivals of spring, which usually fall on the first Sunday of Lent, that is, Quadragesima or Invocavit, Easter Eve, and May Day. Section 2. The Lenten Fires. The custom of kindling bonfires on the first Sunday in Lent has prevailed in Belgium, the north of France, and many parts of Germany. Thus, in the Belgian Ardennes, for a week or a fortnight before the Day of the Great Fire, as it is called, children go about from farm to farm collecting fuel. At Grand Hello, anyone who refuses the request is pursued next day by the children, who try to blacken his face with the ashes of the extinct fire. When the day has come, they cut down bushes, especially juniper and broom, and in the evening great bonfires blaze on all the heights. It is a common saying that 7 bonfires should be seen if the village is to be safe from conflagrations. If the Meuse happens to be frozen hard at the time, bonfires are lit also on the ice. At Grand Hello, they set up a pole called Macral, or the Witch, in the midst of the pile, and the fire is kindled by the man who was last married in the village. In the neighborhood of Morlanwelz, a straw man is burnt in the fire. Young people and children dance and sing round the bonfires, and leap over the embers to secure good crops or a happy marriage within the year, or as a means of guarding themselves against colic. In Brabant, on the same Sunday, down to the beginning of the 19th century, women and men disguised in female attire used to go with burning torches to the fields, where they danced and sang comic songs for the purpose, as they alleged, of driving away the wicked sower who was mentioned in the Gospel for the day. At Pâturges, in the province of Hainaut, down to about 1840, the custom was observed under the name of Escobion or Scobion. Every year on the first Sunday in Lent, which was called the Day of the Little Scobion, young folks and children used to run with lighted torches through the gardens and orchards. As they ran, they cried at the pitch of their voices, "Bear apples, bear pears, and cherries all black, to Scobion." At these words, the torch-bearer whirled his blazing brand and hurled it among the branches of the apple trees, the pear trees, and the cherry trees. The next Sunday was called the Day of the Great Scobion, and the same race with lighted torches among the trees of the orchards was repeated in the afternoon till darkness fell. In the French department of the Ardennes, the whole village used to dance and sing around the bonfires, which were lighted on the first Sunday in Lent. Here, too, it was the person last married, sometimes a man and sometimes a woman, who put the match to the fire. The custom is still kept up very commonly in the district. Cats used to be burnt in the fire, or roasted to death by being held over it, and while they were burning, the shepherds drove their flocks through the smoke and flames as a sure means of guarding them against sickness and witchcraft. In some communes, it was believed that the livelier the dance round the fire, the better would be the crops that year. In the French province of Franche-Comté, to the west of the Jura Mountains, the first Sunday in Lent is known as the Sunday of the Firebrands, on account of the fires which it is customary to kindle on that day. On the Saturday or the Sunday, the village lads harness themselves to a cart and drag it about the streets, stopping at the doors of the houses where there are girls and begging. When they have got enough, they cart the fuel to a spot at some little distance from the village, pile it up, and set it on fire. All the people of the parish come out to see the bonfire. In some villages, when the bells have rung the Angelus, the signal for the observance is given by cries of, "To the fire! To the fire!" Lads, lasses, and children dance round the blaze, and when the flames have died down, they vie with each other in leaping over the red embers. He or she who does so without singeing his or her garments will be married within the year. Young folk also carry lighted torches about the streets or fields, and when they pass an orchard they cry out, "More fruit than leaves!" Down to recent years at La Rion, in the department of Doubs, it was the young married couple of the year who had charge of the bonfires. In the midst of the bonfire, a pole was planted with a wooden figure of a cock fastened to the top. Then there were races, and the winner received the cock as a prize. In Auvergne, fires are everywhere kindled on the evening of the first Sunday in Lent. Every village, every hamlet, even every ward, every isolated farm has its bonfire, or figo as it is called, which blazes up as the shades of night are falling. The fires may be seen flaring on the heights and in the plains. The people dance and sing round about them, and leap through the flames. Then they proceed to the ceremony of the granimai. The granomio is a torch of straw fastened to the top of a pole. When the pyre is half consumed, the bystanders kindle the torches at the expiring flames, and carry them into the neighboring orchards, fields, and gardens, wherever there are fruit trees. As they march, they sing at the top of their voices, "Grano, my friend! Grano, my father! Grano, my mother!" Then they pass the burning torches under the branches of every tree, singing, "Brando brandunci, tasque branzo in plan penne." That is, "Firebrand burn, every branch a basketful." In some villages, the people also run across the sown fields and shake the ashes of the torches on the ground. Also, they put some of the ashes in the fowls' nests, in order that the hens may lay plenty of eggs throughout the year. When all these ceremonies have been performed, everybody goes home and feasts. The special dishes of the evening are fritters and pancakes. Here the application of the fire to the fruit trees, to the sown fields, and to the nests of the poultry is clearly a charm intended to ensure fertility, and the grano, to whom the invocations are addressed, and who gives his name to the torches, may possibly be, as Dr. Pomerol suggests, no other than the ancient Celtic god Granos, whom the Romans identified with Apollo, and whose worship is attested by inscriptions found not only in France, but in Scotland and on the Danube. The custom of carrying lighted torches of straw about the orchards and fields to fertilize them on the first Sunday of Lent seems to have been common in France, whether it was accompanied with the practice of kindling bonfires or not. Thus, in the province of Picardy, quote, "On the first Sunday of Lent, people carried torches through the fields, exorcising the field mice, the darnel, and the smut. They imagined that they did much good to the gardens and caused the onions to grow large. Children ran about the fields, torch in hand, to make the land more fertile. At Vergès, a village between the Jura and the Combe d'Ain, the torches at this season were kindled on the top of a mountain, and the bearers went to every house in the village, demanding roasted peas and obliging all couples who had been married within the year to dance. In Berry, a district of central France, it appears that bonfires are not lighted on this day, but when the sun has set, the whole population of the villages, armed with blazing torches of straw, disperse over the country and scour the fields, the vineyards, and the orchards. Seen from afar, the multitude of moving lights twinkling in the darkness appear like will-o'-the-wisps, chasing each other across the plains, along the hillsides, and down the valleys. When the men wave their flambeaux about the branches of the fruit trees, the women and children tie bands of wheaten straw round the tree trunks. The effect of the ceremony is supposed to be to avert the various plagues from which the fruits of the earth are apt to suffer, and the bands of straw fastened round the stems of the trees are believed to render them fruitful. In Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, at the same season, similar customs have prevailed. Thus, in the Eifel Mountains, Rhenish Prussia, on the first Sunday in Lent, young people used to collect straw and brushwood from house to house. These they carried to an eminence and piled up round a tall, slim beech tree, to which a piece of wood was fastened at right angles to form a cross. The structure was known as the hut or castle. Fire was set to it, and the young people marched round the blazing castle bareheaded, each carrying a lighted torch and praying aloud. Sometimes a straw man was burnt in the hut. People observed the direction in which the smoke blew from the fire. If it blew towards the cornfields, it was a sign that the harvest would be abundant. On the same day, in some parts of the Eifel, a great wheel was made of straw and dragged by 3 horses to the top of the hill. Thither the village boys marched at nightfall, set fire to the wheel, and sent it rolling down the slope. At Oberstadtfeld, the wheel had to be provided by the young man who was last married. About Echternach in Luxembourg, the same ceremony is called burning the witch. At Vorarlberg in the Tyrol, on the first Sunday in Lent, a slender young fir tree is surrounded by a pile of straw and firewood. To the top of the tree is fastened a human figure called the witch, made of old clothes and stuffed with gunpowder. At night, the whole is set on fire, and boys and girls dance round it, swinging torches and singing rhymes in which the words, "Corn in the winnowing basket, the plough in the earth," may be distinguished. In Swabia, on the first Sunday in Lent, a figure called the witch, or the old wife, or winter's grandmother, is made up of clothes and fastened to a pole. This is stuck in the middle of a pile of wood to which fire is applied. While the witch is burning, the young people throw blazing discs into the air. The discs are thin round pieces of wood, a few inches in diameter, with notched edges to imitate the rays of the sun or stars. They have a hole in the middle, by which they are attached to the end of a wand. Before the disc is thrown, it is set on fire, the wand is swung to and fro, and the impetus thus communicated to the disc is augmented by dashing the rod sharply against a sloping board. The burning disc is thus thrown off, and mounting high into the air, describes a long fiery curve before it reaches the ground. The charred embers of the burned witch and discs are taken home and planted in the flax field the same night, in the belief that they will keep vermin from the fields. In the Rhone Mountains, situated on the borders of Hesse and Bavaria, the people used to march to the top of a hill or eminence on the first Sunday in Lent. Children and lads carried torches, brooms daubed with tar, and poles swathed in straw. A wheel wrapped in combustibles was kindled and rolled down the hill, and the young people rushed about the fields with their burning torches and brooms, till at last they flung them in a heap, and standing round them, struck up a hymn or a popular song. The object of running about the fields with the blazing torches was to drive away the wicked sower, or it was done in honor of the Virgin, that she might preserve the fruits of the earth throughout the year and bless them. In neighboring villages of Hesse, between the Rhone and the Vogel mountains, it was thought that wherever the burning wheels roll, the fields will be safe from hail and storm. In Switzerland also, it is or used to be customary to kindle bonfires on high places in the evening of the first Sunday in Lent, and the day is therefore popularly known as Spark Sunday. The custom prevailed, for example, throughout the canton of Lucerne. Boys went about from house to house, begging for wood and straw, then piled the fuel on a conspicuous mountain or hill round about a pole, which bore a straw effigy called the witch. At nightfall, the pile was set on fire, and the young folks danced wildly round it, some of them cracking whips or ringing bells, and when the fire burned low enough, they leaped over it. This was called burning the witch. In some parts of the canton also they used to wrap old wheels in straw and thorns, put a light to them, and send them rolling and blazing downhill. The more bonfires could be seen sparkling and flaring in the darkness, the more fruitful was the year expected to be, and the higher the dancers leapt beside or over the fire, the higher, it was thought, would grow the flax. In some districts, it was the last married man or woman who must kindle the bonfire. It hardly seems possible to separate from these bonfires, kindled on the first Sunday in Lent, the fires in which, about the same season, the effigy called Death is burned as part of the ceremony of carrying out death. We have seen that at Schwackendorf in Austrian Silesia, on the morning of Rupert's Day, a straw man dressed in a fur coat and a fur cap is laid in a hole outside the village and there burned, and that while it is blazing, everyone seeks to snatch a fragment of it, which he fastens to a branch of the highest tree in his garden or buries in his field, believing that this will make the crops grow better. The ceremony is known as the burying of the dead. Even when the straw man is not designated as Death, the meaning of the observance is probably the same, for the name Death, as I have tried to show, does not express the original intention of the ceremony. At Cobern in the Eifel Mountains, the lads make up a straw man on Shrove Tuesday. The effigy is formally tried and accused of having perpetrated all the thefts that have been committed in the neighborhood throughout the year. Being condemned to death, the straw man is led through the village, shot, and burned upon a pyre. They dance round the blazing pile, and the last bride must leap over it. In Oldenburg, on the evening of Shrove Tuesday, people used to make long bundles of straw, which they set on fire, and then ran about the fields waving them, shrieking and singing wild songs. Finally, they burned a straw man on the field. In the district of Düsseldorf, the straw man burned on Shrove Tuesday was made of an unthreshed sheaf of corn. On the first Monday after the spring equinox, the urchins of Zurich drag a straw man on a little cart through the streets, while at the same time the girls carry about a May-tree. When vespers ring, the straw man is burned. In the district of Aachen, on Ash Wednesday, a man used to be encased in peas straw and taken to an appointed place. Here he slipped quietly out of his straw casing, which was then burned, the children thinking that it was the man who was being burned. In the Val d'Aledro, or Tyrol, on the last day of the carnival, a figure is made up of straw and brushwood, and then burned. The figure is called the Old Woman, and the ceremony, burning the Old Woman. Section 3. The Easter Fires. Another occasion on which these fire festivals are held is Easter Eve, the Saturday before Easter Sunday. On that day, it has been customary in Catholic countries to extinguish all the lights in the churches and then to make a new fire, sometimes with flint and steel, sometimes with a burning glass. At this fire is lit the great Paschal, or Easter candle, which is then used to rekindle all the extinguished lights in the church. In many parts of Germany, a bonfire is also kindled by means of the new fire on some open space near the church. It is consecrated, and the people bring sticks of oak, walnut, and beech, which they char in the fire, and then take home with them. Some of these charred sticks are thereupon burned at home in a newly kindled fire, with a prayer that God will preserve the homestead from fire, lightning, and hail. Thus, every house receives new fire. Some of the sticks are kept throughout the year and laid on the hearth fire during heavy thunderstorms to prevent the house from being struck by lightning, or they are inserted in the roof with the like intention. Others are placed in the fields, gardens, and meadows, with a prayer that God will keep them from blight and hail. Such fields and gardens are thought to thrive more than others. The corn and the plants that grow in them are not beaten down by hail, nor devoured by mice, vermin, and beetles. No witch harms them, and the ears of corn stand close and full. The charred sticks are also applied to the plough. The ashes of the Easter bonfire, together with the ashes of the consecrated palm branches, are mixed with the seed at sowing. A wooden figure called Judas is sometimes burned in the consecrated bonfire, and even where this custom has been abolished, the bonfire itself in some places goes by the name of the burning of Judas. The essentially pagan character of the Easter fire festival appears plainly both from the mode in which it is celebrated by the peasants and from the superstitious beliefs which they associate with it. All over northern and central Germany, from Altmark and Anhalt on the east, through Brunswick, Hanover, Oldenburg, the Harz district, and Hesse to Westphalia, the Easter bonfires still blaze simultaneously on the hilltops. As many as 40 may sometimes be counted within sight at once. Long before Easter, the young people have been busy collecting firewood. Every farmer contributes, and tar barrels, petroleum cases, and so forth go to swell the pile. Neighboring villages vie with each other as to which shall send up the brightest blaze. The fires are always kindled, year after year, on the same hill, which accordingly often takes the name of Easter Mountain. It is a fine spectacle to watch from some eminence the bonfires flaring up one after another on the neighboring heights. As far as their light reaches, so far, in the belief of the peasants, the fields will be fruitful, and the houses on which they shine will be safe from conflagration or sickness. At Volkmarsen and other places in Hesse, the people used to observe which way the wind blew the flames, and then they sowed flaxseed in that direction, confident that it would grow well. Brands taken from the bonfires preserve houses from being struck by lightning, and the ashes increase the fertility of the fields, protect them from mice, and mixed with the drinking water of cattle, make the animals thrive and ensure them against plague. As the flames die down, young and old leap over them, and cattle are sometimes driven through the smoldering embers. In some places, tar barrels or wheels wrapped in straw used to be set on fire, and then sent rolling down the hillside. In others, the boys light torches and wisps of straw at the bonfires, and rush about, brandishing them in their hands. In Münsterland, these Easter fires are always kindled upon certain definite hills, which are thence known as Easter or Paschal Mountains. The whole community assembles about the fire. The young men and maidens, singing Easter hymns, march round and round the fire till the blaze dies down. Then the girls jump over the fire in a line, one after the other, each supported by 2 young men who hold her hands and run beside her. In the twilight, boys with blazing bundles of straw run over the fields to make them fruitful. At Delmenhorst, in Oldenburg, it used to be the custom to cut down 2 trees, plant them in the ground side by side, and pile 12 tar barrels against each. Brushwood was then heaped about the trees, and on the evening of Easter Saturday the boys, after rushing about with blazing bean poles in their hands, set fire to the whole. At the end of the ceremony, the urchins tried to blacken each other and the clothes of grown-up people. In the Altmark, it is believed that as far as the blaze of the Easter bonfire is visible, the corn will grow well throughout the year, and no conflagration will break out. At Brownrode, in the Harz Mountains, it was the custom to burn squirrels in the Easter bonfire. In the Altmark, bones were burned in it. Near Forchheim, in Upper Franken, a straw man called the Judas used to be burned in the churchyards on Easter Saturday. The whole village contributed wood to the pyre on which he perished, and the charred sticks were afterwards kept and planted in the fields on Walpurgis Day, or the 1st of May, to preserve the wheat from blight and mildew. About 100 years ago or more, the custom at Altheneberg in Upper Bavaria used to be as follows. On the afternoon of Easter Saturday, the lads collected wood, which they piled in a cornfield, while in the middle of the pile they set up a tall wooden cross all swathed in straw. After the evening service, they lighted their lanterns at the consecrated candle in the church and ran with them at full speed to the pyre, each striving to get there first. The first to arrive set fire to the heap. No woman or girl might come near the bonfire, but they were allowed to watch it from a distance. As the flames rose, the men and lads rejoiced and made merry, shouting, "We are burning the Judas!" The man who had been the first to reach the pyre and to kindle it was rewarded on Easter Sunday by the women, who gave him colored eggs at the church door. The object of the whole ceremony was to keep off the hail. At other villages of Upper Bavaria, the ceremony, which took place between 9 and 10 at night on Easter Saturday, was called burning the Easter man. On a height about a mile from the village, the young people set up a tall cross enveloped in straw, so that it looked like a man with his arms stretched out. This was the Easter man. No lad under 18 years of age might take part in the ceremony. One of the young men stationed himself beside the Easter man, holding in his hand a consecrated taper, which he had brought from the church and lighted. The rest stood at equal intervals in a great circle round the cross. At a given signal they raced thrice round the circle, and then, at a second signal, ran straight at the cross, and at the lad with the lighted taper beside it. The one who reached the goal first had the right of setting fire to the Easter man. Great was the jubilation while he was burning. When he had been consumed in the flames, 3 lads were chosen from among the rest, and each of the 3 drew a circle on the ground with a stick thrice around the ashes. Then they all left the spot. On Easter Monday, the villagers gathered the ashes and strewed them on their fields. Also, they planted in the fields palm branches which had been consecrated on Palm Sunday, and sticks which had been charred and hallowed on Good Friday, all for the purpose of protecting their fields against showers of hail. In some parts of Swabia, the Easter fires might not be kindled with iron or steel or flint, but only by the friction of wood. The custom of the Easter fires appears to have prevailed all over central and western Germany, from north to south. We find it also in Holland, where the fires were kindled on the highest eminences, and the people danced round them and leapt through the flames or over the glowing embers. Here, too, as often in Germany, the materials for the bonfire were collected by the young folk from door to door. In many parts of Sweden, firearms are discharged in all directions on Easter Eve, and huge bonfires are lighted on hills and eminences. Some people think that the intention is to keep off the troll and other evil spirits who are especially active at this season. Section 4. The Beltane Fires. In the central highlands of Scotland, bonfires, known as the Beltane Fires, were formerly kindled with great ceremony on the 1st of May, and the traces of human sacrifice at them were particularly clear and unequivocal.
The custom of lighting the bonfires lasted in various places far into the 18th century, and the descriptions of the ceremony by writers of that period present such a curious and interesting picture of ancient heathendom surviving in our own country that I will reproduce them in the words of their authors. The fullest of the descriptions is the one bequeathed to us by John Ramsay, Laird of Ochtertyre, near Crieff, the patron of Burns and the friend of Sir Walter Scott. He says, quote, "But the most considerable of the Druidical festivals is that of Beltane, or May Day, which was lately observed in some parts of the Highlands with extraordinary ceremonies. Like the other public worship of the Druids, the Beltane feast seems to have been performed on hills or eminences. They thought it degrading to him whose temple is the universe to suppose that he would dwell in any house made with hands. Their sacrifices were therefore offered in the open air, frequently upon the tops of hills, where they were presented with the grandest views of nature, and were nearest the seat of warmth and order. And according to tradition, such was the manner of celebrating this festival in the Highlands within the last 100 years. But since the decline of superstition, it has been celebrated by the people of each hamlet on some hill or rising ground, around which their cattle were pasturing. Thither the young folks repaired in the morning, and cut a trench, on the summit of which a seat of turf was formed for the company. And in the middle a pile of wood or other fuel was placed, which of old they kindled with tein eigen, i.e., forced fire or need fire. Although for many years past they have been contented with common fire, yet we shall now describe the process, because it will hereafter appear that recourse is still had to the tein eigen upon extraordinary emergencies. The night before, all the fires in the country were carefully extinguished, and next morning the materials for exciting this sacred fire were prepared. The most primitive method seems to be that which was used in the islands of Skye, Mull, and Tiree. A well-seasoned plank of oak was procured, in the midst of which a hole was bored. A wimble of the same timber was then applied, the end of which they fitted to the hole. But in some parts of the mainland the machinery was different. They used a frame of green wood of a square form, in the centre of which was an axle tree. In some places 3 times 3 persons, in others 3 times 9, were required for turning round by turns the axle tree or wimble. If any of them had been guilty of murder, adultery, theft, or other atrocious crime, it was imagined either that the fire would not kindle, or that it would be devoid of its usual virtue. So soon as any sparks were emitted by means of the violent friction, they applied a species of agaric which grows on old birch trees and is very combustible. This fire had the appearance of being immediately derived from heaven, and manifold were the virtues ascribed to it. They esteemed it a preservative against witchcraft, and a sovereign remedy against malignant diseases, both in the human species and in cattle, and by it the strongest poisons were supposed to have their nature changed. After kindling the bonfire with the tein eigen, the company prepared their victuals, and as soon as they had finished their meal, they amused themselves a while in singing and dancing round the fire. Towards the close of the entertainment, the person who officiated as master of the feast produced a large cake baked with eggs and scalloped round the edge, called ambonach betain, i.e., the Beltane cake. It was divided into a number of pieces, and distributed in great form to the company. There was one particular piece, which whoever got was called Cailbec Beltane, i.e., the Beltane Caroline, a term of great reproach. Upon his being known, part of the company laid hold of him, and made a show of putting him into the fire. But the majority interposing, he was rescued. And in some places they laid him flat on the ground, making as if they would quarter him. Afterwards he was pelted with eggshells, and retained the odious appellation during the whole year. And while the feast was fresh in people's memory, they affected to speak of the Cailleach Bealtaine as dead. Close quote. In the parish of Callander, a beautiful district of western Perthshire, the Beltane custom was still in vogue towards the end of the 18th century. It has been described as follows by the parish minister of the time. Quote, "Upon the first day of May, which is called Beltan or Beltane Day, all the boys in a township or hamlet meet in the moors. They cut a table in the green sod of a round figure by casting a trench in the ground of such circumference as to hold the whole company. They kindle a fire and dress a repast of eggs and milk in the consistence of a custard. They knead a cake of oatmeal, which is toasted at the embers against a stone. After the custard is eaten up, they divide the cake into so many portions, as similar as possible to one another in size and shape, as there are persons in the company. They daub one of these portions all over with charcoal until it be perfectly black. They put all the bits of the cake into a bonnet. Every one, blindfold, draws out a portion. He who holds the bonnet is entitled to the last bit. Whoever draws the black bit is the devoted person, who is to be sacrificed to Baal, whose favor they mean to implore, in rendering the year productive of the sustenance of man and beast. There is little doubt of these inhuman sacrifices having been once offered in this country, as well as in the East, although they now pass from the act of sacrificing, and only compel the devoted person to leap 3 times through the flames with which the ceremonies of this festival are closed." Close quote. Thomas Pennant, who travelled in Perthshire in the year 1769, tells us that, quote, "On the 1st of May, the herdsmen of every village hold their Beltane, a rural sacrifice. They cut a square trench on the ground, leaving the turf in the middle. On that they make a fire of wood, on which they dress a large caudle of eggs, butter, oatmeal, and milk, and bring besides the ingredients of the caudle plenty of beer and whiskey, for each of the company must contribute something. The rites begin with spilling some of the caudle on the ground by way of libation. On that every one takes a cake of oatmeal, upon which are raised 9 square knobs, each dedicated to some particular being, the supposed preserver of their flocks and herds, or to some particular animal, the real destroyer of them. Each person then turns his face to the fire, breaks off a knob, and flinging it over his shoulder says, 'This I give to thee, preserve thou my horses. This to thee, preserve thou my sheep,' and so on. After that, they use the same ceremony to the noxious animals. 'This I give to thee, O fox, spare thou my lambs. This to thee, O hooded crow. This to thee, O eagle.' When the ceremony is over, they dine on the caudle, and after the feast is finished, what is left is hid by 2 persons deputed for that purpose. But on the next Sunday they reassemble and finish the relics of the first entertainment." Close quote. Another writer of the 18th century has described the Beltane festival as it was held in the parish of Logaret in Perthshire. He says, quote, "On the 1st of May, Old Style, a festival called Beltane is annually held there. It is chiefly celebrated by the cowherds, who assemble by scores in the fields, to dress a dinner for themselves of boiled milk and eggs. These dishes they eat with a sort of cake baked for the occasion, and having small lumps in the form of nipples raised all over the surface." Close quote. In this last account no mention is made of bonfires, but they were probably lighted, for a contemporary writer informs us that in the parish of Kirkmichael, which adjoins the parish of Logaret on the east, the custom of lighting a fire in the fields and baking a consecrated cake on the 1st of May was not quite obsolete in his time. We may conjecture that the cake with knobs was formerly used for the purpose of determining who should be the Beltane Carline, or victim doomed to the flames. A trace of this custom survived, perhaps, in the custom of baking oatmeal cakes of a special kind and rolling them downhill about noon on the 1st of May, for it was thought that the person whose cake broke as it rolled would die or be unfortunate within the year. These cakes, or bannocks as we call them in Scotland, were baked in the usual way, but they were washed over with a thin batter composed of whipped egg, milk or cream, and a little oatmeal. This custom appears to have prevailed at or near Cungasee in Inverness-shire. In the northeast of Scotland, the Beltane fires were still kindled in the latter half of the 18th century, and herdsmen of several farms used to gather dry wood, kindle it, and dance 3 times southways about the burning pile. But in this region, according to a later authority, the Beltane fires were lit, not on the 1st, but on the 2nd of May, Old Style. They were called bonfires. The people believed that on that evening and night, the witches were abroad and busy casting spells on cattle and stealing cow's milk. To counteract their machinations, pieces of rowan tree and woodbine, but especially of rowan tree, were placed over the doors of the cow-houses, and fires were kindled by every farmer and cotter. Old thatch, straw, furze, or broom was piled in a heap and set on fire a little after sunset. While some of the bystanders kept tossing the blazing mass, others hoisted portions of it on pitchforks or poles, and ran hither and thither, holding them as high as they could. Meantime, the young people danced round the fire, or ran through the smoke, shouting, "Fire! Blaze and burn the witches! Fire! Fire! Burn the witches!" In some districts, a large round cake of oat or barley meal was rolled through the ashes. When all the fuel was consumed, the people scattered the ashes far and wide, and till the night grew quite dark, they continued to run through them, crying, "Fire! Burn the witches!" In the Hebrides, quote, "the Beltane bannock is smaller than that made at St. Michael's, but is made in the same way. It is no longer made in oist, but Father Allen remembers seeing his grandfather make one about 25 years ago. There was also a cheese made, generally on the 1st of May, which was kept to the next Beltane as a sort of charm against the bewitching of milk produce. The Beltane customs seem to have been the same as elsewhere. Every fire was put out, and a large one lit on the top of the hill, and the cattle driven round it sunwards to keep off murrain all the year. Each man would take home fire wherewith to kindle his own." Close quote. In Wales, also, the custom of lighting Beltane fires at the beginning of May used to be observed, but the day on which they were kindled varied from the eve of May Day to the 3rd of May. The flame was sometimes elicited by the friction of 2 pieces of oak, as appears from the following description. Quote, "The fire was done in this way. 9 men would turn their pockets inside out, and see that every piece of money and all metals were off their persons. Then the men went into the nearest woods, and collected sticks of 9 different kinds of trees. These were carried to the spot where the fire had to be built. There a circle was cut in the sod, and the sticks were set crosswise. All around the circle the people stood and watched the proceedings. One of the men would take 2 bits of oak and rub them together until a flame was kindled. This was applied to the sticks, and soon a large fire was made. Sometimes 2 fires were set up side by side. These fires, whether 1 or 2, were called coelcerth, or bonfire. Round cakes of oatmeal and brown meal were split in 4, and placed in a small flour bag, and everybody present had to pick out a portion. The last bit in the bag fell to the lot of the bag holder. Each person who chanced to pick up a piece of the brown meal cake was compelled to leap 3 times over the flames, or to run thrice between the 2 fires, by which means the people thought they were sure of a plentiful harvest. Shouts and screams of those who had to face the ordeal could be heard ever so far, and those who chanced to pick the oatmeal portions sang and danced and clapped their hands in approval, as the holders of the brown bits leapt 3 times over the flames, or ran 3 times between the 2 fires." Close quote. The belief of the people that by leaping thrice over the bonfires or running thrice between them they ensured a plentiful harvest is worthy of note. The mode in which this result was supposed to be brought about is indicated by another writer on Welsh folklore, according to whom it used to be held that, quote, "the bonfires lighted in May or midsummer protected the lands from sorcery, so that good crops would follow. The ashes were also considered valuable as charms." Close quote. Hence, it appears that the heat of the fires was thought to fertilize the fields, not directly by quickening the seeds in the ground, but indirectly by counteracting the baleful influence of witchcraft, or perhaps by burning up the persons of the witches. The Beltane fires seem to have been kindled also in Ireland, for Cormac, or somebody in his name, says that, quote, "Beltane, May Day, was so called from the lucky fire, or the 2 fires, which the Druids of Erin used to make on that day with great incantations." Close quote. And cattle, he adds, used to be brought to those fires, or to be driven between them as a safeguard against the diseases of the year. The custom of driving cattle through or between fires on May Day or the eve of May Day persisted in Ireland down to a time within living memory. The 1st of May is a great popular festival in the more midland and southern parts of Sweden. On the eve of the festival, huge bonfires, which should be lighted by striking 2 flints together, blaze on all the hills and knolls. Every large hamlet has its own fire, round which the young people dance in a ring. The old folk notice whether the flames incline to the north or to the south. In the former case, the spring will be cold and backward. In the latter, it will be mild and genial. In Bohemia, on the eve of May Day, young people kindle fires on hills and eminences, at crossways and in pastures, and dance round them. They leap over the glowing embers, or even through the flames. The ceremony is called burning the witches. In some places, an effigy representing a witch used to be burnt in the bonfire. We have to remember that the eve of May Day is the notorious Walpurgis night, when the witches are everywhere speeding unseen through the air on their hellish errands. On this witching night, children in Voigtland also light bonfires on the heights and leap over them. Moreover, they wave burning brooms or toss them into the air. So far as the light of the bonfire reaches, so far will a blessing rest on the fields. The kindling of the fires on Walpurgis night is called driving away the witches. The custom of kindling fires on the eve of May Day, or Walpurgis night, for the purpose of burning the witches is, or used to be, widespread in the Tyrol, Moravia, Saxony, and Silesia.
End of chapter 62, part 1.